Today I thought we'd do something a little closer to the present. This time we are going to look at a case that happened just this year in the state of Mississippi in the USA. This case literally happened before our eyes, and the perpetrator is a then 14-year-old girl. There is very little confusion as to what she did and how she did it because almost everything was caught on camera. But don't worry, there's no graphic footage here. So, as for today's topic, there are not so many question marks around the crime itself, but there is the question of how guilty the perpetrator really is. It all started on March 19, 2024. We could argue that it actually started several years earlier, but the point is that March 19th was the day it all broke. Ashley Smiley was a math teacher, specifically geometry teacher, at Northwest Rankin High School, where her daughter Carly Gregg also attended. And that day, one of Carly's friends came up to her teacher Ashley to tell her the scary information, while another friend distracted Carly and kept her away. That day, 40-year-old Ashley Smiley learned shocking and disturbing information about her own daughter. What happened was that a young man who was friends with Carly was so concerned about what he saw in Carly's room that he decided to talk to Carly about it. They had an argument, and she sent him somewhere where the sun didn't shine and was very angry with him. But he was worried about her, and so he brought his friend in to help him sort things out. In the end, they decided to go directly to Carly's mother, who was also their teacher, and they told her everything. Ashley listened to the boys and believed them. When she drove Carly home from school that day, she warned her in the car that she planned to search her room because she wanted to find out what was really going on and if the boy was telling the truth. Carly didn't argue with her or defend herself in any way. When they got home and got out of the car, Carly was clearly irritated. But she let her mother search her room while she took the dogs out to the yard for a walk. And it was at that moment that Ashley made a shocking discovery in her daughter's room. A friend of Carly's claimed to have spotted a large supply of marijuana and THC vape pens hidden in her room just hours before. Yes, these things may not be that unusual for a teenager, but there was more to this case. The friend was concerned about the amount of marijuana Carly had, and the fact that she had several so-called burner phones in her room, which you could say are one-time use phones with prepaid SIM cards. What did Carly need these things for? The so-called burner phones added a darker touch to the whole situation, a finding that would have worried any parent. Carly, however, was different in many ways. Carly, then 14, had a long history of mental health issues. She had struggled with bouts of depression and severe mood swings since childhood. According to some testimonies, Carly also heard voices. While we have no official medical documentation confirming auditory hallucinations, we do know that she attended therapy sessions to cope with this problem. She also reportedly attended hypnotherapy in her youth to help her become more mentally stable. For those of you who may not know, hypnotherapy is horse-assisted therapy. Specialists will take patients to stables, for example, where they can help care for the horses, or possibly ride a horse. This therapy is said to help people better manage their emotions, and can also benefit those struggling with addictions. But to get back to the case, Carly had mental problems, which was partly reflected in her behavior at school. She was getting excellent grades and doing well in class, but socially she was struggling. Perhaps the word social is not entirely accurate, as Carly had many friends and girlfriends, but she often had behavioral problems and got into conflicts at school. The school authorities often dealt with her when she was in trouble, and she was even transferred to an alternative school at one point after she was caught with a knife in her classroom. On the other hand, we have Carly as a brilliant student. And when I say brilliant, I mean it. Her lawyer later said this: she skipped third grade, so while she's now a sophomore at Northwest Rankin High School, based on her age, She should only be a freshman. Carly was even Student of the Month and Student of the Year before this event. We'll get to what is actually meant by event in a moment. Before I get to the main point, there is one more thing I need to mention to give the whole story the proper context. I know I said before that we have no official documentation to confirm that Carly suffered from auditory hallucinations, but we know for a fact that she was taking medication to support her mental health. Not only that, we also know that they changed her medication just days before her mother Ashley discovered the stash of stuff in her room. According to the information we have, Carly's new meds did more harm than good. She reportedly had more frequent and severe mood swings, and when she wasn't going through these episodes, she said the medication made her feel, in her own words, numb. Thus, she later claimed that her emotions were completely exaggerated on the evening that her mother, Ashley, confronted her about the stash in her room. So, yes, Carly opened the door and let the dogs into the garden through the glass door in the kitchen. Then she walked into the living room, where she paused for a few seconds as if trying to listen to what her mother was doing in her room. Then walked off to the right, across the living room to her room, where she saw her mother, Ashley, still going through her things. And we know all of this because it was recorded on the camera they had set up in the kitchen. Ashley had previously taken several vape pens from Carly's room to her bedroom. She was probably going to throw them away or do something with them, but never got around to it. When Carly saw that her mother was still searching her room, she immediately headed to her mother and stepfather's bedroom. So we see her cross over to the other side in the footage. In her mother's bedroom, Carly lifted up the mattress and pulled out Ashley's gun, a .357 Magnum. She proceeded very cautiously. She knew there were security cameras in the house, so she allegedly kept the gun behind her back. I use the word allegedly because Carly was really careful. We just never see the gun directly on the surveillance footage. All we see is Carly moving around the house, sometimes in rather unusual positions to face the camera and carefully conceal what she's holding behind her back. It was almost as if she knew that what she was about to do was very wrong and could get her into a lot of trouble. And that's something that's key later on. Whether or not she knew what she was doing was wrong, and whether or not she planned it. After Carly came out of her mother's bedroom, she peeked into the kitchen for a few seconds, probably to make sure Ashley wasn't there. When she sees that the kitchen is empty, she goes back into her room, so she disappears out of camera range again and heads towards the right. We can't see on the home security camera footage what happened next in her room, but we can hear it. And what we hear is almost unimaginable. Carly then bursts into the room and fires. The footage captures the chilling sound of 3 shots being fired. They all hit their targets. Ashley was hit twice in the face and once in the neck. And yet, almost unbelievably, she didn't die instantly. The footage shows her screaming after the first shot, which stops after the second. But later, Ashley can still be heard moaning a bit, as she died after she bled out. I can't imagine what Ashley must have been feeling or thinking at that moment. She must have been in complete shock, completely broken, because she had just been shot by her own daughter. Of course, we can't say for sure what Ashley was experiencing in her final moments. All we know is that she had time to think about everything we just discussed. She had time to feel it all, the shock, the confusion, the betrayal, before she succumbed to her injuries. And she probably even had time to worry about what Carly would do next. Because Ashley and Carly didn't live alone in the house. And now Ashley was completely helpless, unable to stop Carly from attacking her next victim. It was to be a man whose name was Heath Smiley. Ashley was previously married to a man named Kevin Gregg. Their marriage lasted about 10 years and they had Carly together before each went their separate ways. Ashley then found new love with Heath, who became her second husband and Carly's stepfather. Heath was at work when Carly pointed the gun at Ashley, but he was due home any minute. Security footage taken on that fateful day also shows Carly returning to the kitchen after the crime. Still avoiding showing the camera what's behind her back, she immediately picks up her mother's phone from the kitchen counter before sitting down on one of the stools, putting the gun down behind her back. Two of their dogs hover around her, confused and concerned, as Carly sits, punching in the passcode, unlocking her mother's phone to type a message. "When will you be home, honey?" She just sent this text to her stepfather Heath from her mother's cell phone. So Carly pretends to be her mother, Ashley, and starts setting a trap for Heath. Sometime after writing this, really only minutes after the horrible act, Carly heard her mother's silent wailing, so she stood up, one hand reaching behind her back to grab her gun. In her other hand, she held her mother's phone and went to look at her. In a flash, she went back into the kitchen. Her stepfather, Heath, unaware of what awaits him soon under his own roof, sends Carly a message on her mother's phone that he will be home in about an hour. Carly responds with a thumbs-up emoji, and now that she knows she has plenty of time, she decides to do something incredibly cold and cruel. She puts down her mother's phone and moves out of camera range. Over the next 45 minutes, she uses her phone to connect or attempt to connect with 5 or 6 of her friends. Some attempts were via FaceTime, others via text message. She texts them that she has an emergency and urges them to come over. Most of them reply that they can't. One of her friends offers to call the police, but Carly refuses. Finally, one friend agrees to come right away. This friend, later identified only by the initials BW, meets Carly at the front door. "Does the sight of dead bodies bother you?" Carly asks before inviting her inside. It's unclear whether her friend took Carly's question seriously and whether she actually thought there was a body inside the house, but she was soon to see for herself that there was. Saying, "My mom's in there," Carly led her friend toward the room where she showed her mom and added, "I gave my mom 3 shots and 3 more are waiting for my stepdad when he gets home." Her friend, perhaps shocked by what she has just heard and seen, agrees to stay and help Carly, who then asks her to wait outside in the garden while she prepares for the situation that will arise when Heath returns. Carly then opens the garage door and waits for her stepfather to come home. When Heath arrives, nothing seems suspicious at first glance. For him, it was just another ordinary evening. He was returning home after a normal day at work. But that changed when he reached the kitchen door. Heath later described what happened to him. "The gun went off right in my face before I even opened the door 3 or 4 inches. It flashed right in front of my eyes. Then the gun went off 2 more times, but after the first shot I was holding it already with my hand. Fortunately for Heath, the first shot missed, giving him time to defend. Even though one of the next shots hit his shoulder, he continued to wrestle with Carly and managed to wrestle the gun out of her hands. So, Carly's plan failed. She lost her weapon and the advantage of surprise. She screamed at the top of her lungs, and instead of fighting on, she decided to run. The next thing Carly's friend who was outside saw was Carly herself running out the back door of the house, tripping and falling, then getting up and yelling at her to run. Both Carly and her friend then jumped the fence and ran in different directions, leaving Heath the only living person at the scene. Once he recovered from the shock of being attacked by the stepdaughter he thought of as his own, he began to walk around the house, trying to understand what had actually happened. And then he found Ashley. "She killed her mom!" Heath told 911 operators in a 6-minute call that was later described as panic-filled. He said, "Oh my God, she killed her mother. She hit me in the neck. It scratched me. She tried to kill me too. She ran away." Operators and first responders said Heath looked completely shaken and broken and was trying to hold back tears the entire time. Later in court, Heath detailed and showed how he found Ashley. She was lying on her back, he said. Her hands were there and her face was covered with a towel. I knew she had been shot. There was some blood around. I think on the right side of her face, but I'm not sure exactly where. A sheriff's deputy named Hunter Lewis of the Rankin County Patrol was promptly dispatched to the scene. Lewis was wearing a body camera, and the footage was later played in the courtroom when the man testified. He stated that when he arrived at the house, the front door was locked. As he stood outside the door, he heard someone inside the house screaming hysterically. Lewis said that person was Heath, whom he described as distraught. The footage played in the courtroom further showed Heath falling to the ground and telling Lewis that his wife Ashley was dead inside the house. He further told the sheriff that he had sustained a gunshot wound. The shot had gone through his shoulder, near his neck, and that Carly had escaped out the back door of the house. Lewis then walked through the house and found Ashley in Carly's room, with a towel draped over her face. Lewis stated that when he lifted the towel, he discovered that Ashley had been shot. Police then detained Carly and arrested her a short distance from her home. Once Carly was in handcuffs and a second officer arrived on the scene, they ran a test. They swabbed her hands to confirm the presence of gunpowder particles. That is, to confirm that she had actually fired the gun. During this test, everything was again recorded because the officers were wearing cameras. Both officers interacted with Carly, and Carly looked scared in the footage. But who knows if she was scared or just wanted to appear like a vulnerable child. When asked which hand she shot with, she said she didn't know, she didn't remember. The test confirmed gunshot residue on both her hands. It's also important to note that aside from looking scared on the footage, she doesn't look downright sad. She didn't shed a tear. At one point, she asked the policeman on her right, "Is my stepfather all right?" And he replied, "I don't know, honey. I can't talk to you about it."
Alright, is my stepdad okay? I don't know, baby. I can't talk to you about this.
Then the second officer who took the samples from her hands asked, "Are you okay?" And Carly said, "Yeah." And that's what strikes many people. She just answered that she was fine shortly after she shot her mother and shot her stepfather.
Are you okay? Yeah. Okay.
It also begs the question of why she asked if her stepfather was okay. Was she worried about him? She just tried to kill him. So, she asked, because she wondered if he actually survived and would talk? I'd guess so. But the main question that occupied everyone at the time, and later the court, was why. Why did she do all this? And also whether her mental health issues were behind her actions that day. Before the trial began, Carly underwent psychiatric evaluations to determine whether she was mentally fit to stand trial at all. It was here that Carly's attorneys began to sow the seeds of their defense, based on the fact that Carly was not only mentally unstable, but that she was driven to her actions by the new medications she had been put on, and that she was psychotic at the time of the crime. With the evidence that there was no point in trying to prove that Carly was not the perpetrator at all. The fact that she did was a fact, so that left only one option, the insanity defense. The original psychiatrist, Dr. Amanda Gugliano, who was supposed to evaluate Carla's condition, eventually withdrew from the case. She stated that she did not have a deep enough understanding of the effects of prescription drugs to make an informed assessment of Carla's condition. The defense immediately used this to its advantage. It suggested that even experts could not say for sure what side effects the new drugs might have had on Carly. Still, the defense found itself at a disadvantage. In fact, a key expert whose presence could have had a major impact was absent from the pre-trial hearing. The defense hired its own psychiatrist to assess Carly's condition, a respected expert, Dr. Mark Webb. Dr. Webb did not appear at the hearing himself. That in itself is not that unusual. Often experts do not have to appear in person at pre-trial hearings, but what is needed are the reports they have been asked to prepare. In this case, Dr. Webb was asked to evaluate Carly's condition, but his report was missing from the pre-trial evidence. For those of you who may not know, the American trial is not like the movies, where someone bursts into the courtroom at the last minute with new evidence that breaks the case. In fact, all evidence to be used in court must be presented before the trial begins. The reason for this is that both sides need to be able to prepare their arguments against each piece of evidence, and if the evidence comes too late, they would not have enough time to properly prepare. Of course, with any system, there are people who try to use it to their advantage. This may involve hiding evidence amongst piles of possibly useless or just uninteresting information, or perhaps waiting until the last minute to present some evidence. And that's exactly what the judge accused Carly's attorneys of doing in this case. At the pretrial hearing, where Dr. Webb's report was missing, Judge Dewey K. Arthur turned to the defense and said, "This is beginning to look like a deliberate attempt to gain a tactical advantage. It's a total ambush, a total setup to withhold the report until 10 days before trial, and that's certainly not the purpose of an insanity defense. If she was indeed insane or under the influence of these drugs, why wait until 10 days before trial? It looks bad in front of a jury." He then ordered that all evidence must be submitted by the end of the day on August 20th, or it could not be used in the trial. "The purpose of evidence is to get to the truth," he said. "It is not a tool for one side to ambush the other. I'll be frank. If the young lady really suffers from some mental defect, illness, or was under the wrong influence of medication, she should be acquitted. If not, then such a defense is very risky." And it was risky indeed. The defense relied heavily on the argument that Carly was innocent by reason of insanity. So much so that Carly rejected a plea bargain with the prosecution, which offered her a 40-year prison sentence. I know it sounds like a long sentence, but Carly was facing serious charges. She was charged with murder, attempted murder, and tampering with evidence because she tried to hide one of the cameras in the house, specifically the one in the kitchen. When the first officers got there and Heath told them there were cameras in the house, the most important one, the one in the kitchen, wasn't in place and hadn't been there when Heath arrived. And he didn't understand where the camera was, said he didn't put it anywhere. It wasn't until some time later that the camera was discovered, and investigators concluded that Carly had removed it from its original location and then hidden it herself so that investigators wouldn't find it and use the footage against her. The murder charge itself carried the possibility of a life sentence without the possibility of parole. She faced up to 20 years for attempted murder and another 10 years for tampering with evidence. So, a plea bargain that would have gotten Carly 40 years behind bars doesn't sound bad by comparison. But Carly rejected the plea deal and confirmed to the judge that she fully understood the extent of her decisions. By taking the case to court, she was aware that she was likely to face a harsher sentence if convicted. The defense attorneys, however, were clearly confident in the scrambles, because in the meantime, they had acquired a key witness and believed his testimony could sway the minds and hearts of the jury. For it was her stepfather himself, Heath Smiley, who took the stand in Carla's defense. Before we get to his testimony, it's worth mentioning the defense's opening statement. She said the court would hear a lot of things from the prosecutors, like that Carly was leading a secret life, that she had a secret boyfriend that she corresponded with. Yes, from this opening statement, which I'll quote from in a moment, we'll finally learn more about what Carly had hidden in her room and why. So, the defense attorney's opening statement to the jury talked about what the jury could expect the prosecution to present. She stated this: "Ladies and gentlemen, In the coming days of these proceedings, you will hear various testimonies. You will hear about some secret life that Carly led. You will hear that Carly had a secret boyfriend. You will hear that she had a secret iPod, that she had secret social media accounts on, and used to communicate when her parents took her phone away. You'll hear that she had secret burner phones that her mom and stepdad didn't know about, and she used them. You will hear that she had secret vape pens with marijuana in them and that she smoked from them in secret and sometimes did so before she went to school. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not why we're here. We're here because of what she did on March 19th, 2024. We expect to hear that Carly is the daughter of Ashley Smiley and the stepdaughter of Heath Smiley. You'll hear that Heath and Ashley were married sometime in 2020. You'll hear that Carly's biological father hasn't been in her life for a year or more, that he was a known drug user and had a propensity for violence and anger. You'll hear that in January, Carly got in trouble with her parents when they found this iPod that she was using to secretly communicate through these accounts. You'll hear that around the same time she had a boyfriend who her parents found out about and asked her to break up with, and later found out that she was still seeing the boy. You will hear that at some point she was in trouble at school, cheating. She found the answers to a test and gave them out to other students. You'll hear that all of this was going on around the time that they found out that Carly was cutting her thighs. You will hear that as caring parents, they arranged for Carly to attend therapy. They were treating her for anxiety and stress. You'll hear that she continued to smoke from those vape pens during therapy. So this and much more was said in the opening statement of Carly's defense attorney, who tried to say during the trial that all of this was indicative of Carly's mental health problems. The prosecutors, in turn, were pointing out that it was also indicative of the fact that Carly was a problem child in all respects. She led a secret life. You could say she was already leading a double life at such a young age. Yeah, maybe everyone at that age is hiding something from their parents. But not many people have secret iPods and secret disposable phones at home. And few would kill their parents when they find out, and when it seems to mean that this secret life and relationship with the secret boyfriend will be over. According to the prosecution, Carly became extremely angry the moment her mother found 4 boxes of evidence of all this in her room. What if she read everything she wrote from secret social media accounts? What if she read the conversations with her secret boyfriend? Ashley's already told her she doesn't want her to smoke. She was restricting her. Carly got so mad she figured she'd just deal with it. But Carly got angry in a different way. She didn't yell at her mother that it wasn't fair, that she was almost an adult and should be able to do whatever she wanted. She didn't tell her that she was looking forward to finally getting out of the house in 4 years. No, despite all the emotions inside, Carly seemed outwardly icy calm. It was scary. She just went for the gun and then shot her mother 3 times, right in the face. Some experts have suggested that Carly may have felt that the identity she perceived as her true self, though hidden from the world, was compromised by the discovery of the items in her room. Thus, Carly felt threatened by her mother. She felt that her mother was taking her identity, and so she took hers by shooting her in the face. She knew that her stepfather had to get out of the way too. She knew she had a free moment because Heath had texted her and she used the time to start texting her friends, communicating with some of them over FaceTime over the next 45 minutes. She wanted someone to come help her, but she didn't want to say exactly what was going on or what she wanted help with. She just wanted them to come. That was all she asked for. When one of her friends offered to call 911, Carly refused. So, did she really want help? Or did she want to show off what she'd just done? And she wanted to show someone what she was capable of and what she had just done. Although she told them she wanted to help, when they offered to help, she refused. So this all gives us a certain picture. I wanted to mention all this before we get to Heath's statement. Despite the fact that Carly killed her mother, his wife, and also tried to take his life, Heath testified in court that Carly was always just a sweet little girl to him. He was asked at the very beginning if he and Carly were still in a relationship. Heath replied that they were, that he thought they were good together and smiled at that. He actually smiled directly at Carly, and she smiled back. Then comes the question about how often they communicate, and Heath replied that probably every day. Have a look at the video.
Do you and Carly still have a relationship?
Yes, I think we're good.
Okay. And how frequently do you and Carly talk?
Just about every day now.
Many have formed the belief, based on Heath's performance in court, that he was somehow involved with Carly in all of this. But this is completely unfounded and there is no evidence to support it. It's more likely that he doesn't want to see the incredible evil in Carly and is trying to believe something more believable to him, that Carly is not to blame for her behavior that day. Heath then described to the jury the moment Carly attacked him, saying she had huge black eyes and looked like she saw a demon. I've never seen anything like that, not even in the movies, Heath testified. It wasn't her, and I don't believe she even recognized me. She was screaming, she was scared to death. According to Heath, Carly wasn't acting for herself that day. He said her mental state was very bad and he didn't blame her for what happened. He stands by her and, as stated, talks to her every day. Well, so Heath's take is that Carly was just out of it that day, and when he arrived home and opened the door and she shot at him, she seemed scared out of her mind, her eyes were big, and he now believes she didn't even recognize him in the deranged state she was in, and was simply defending herself from the intruder her sick mind had made of him. Well, that's not what most of the public thinks, or what the prosecutors think. And it's not what I think. She herself told a friend shortly before that she had 3 bullets for her mother, and 3 more waiting for Heath, her stepfather. So she knew exactly who Heath was, and her scream of terror at the shooting? Personally, I don't think she was scared of who it was that came in and shot him. I think, and I'm not alone, that she screamed because she didn't shoot Heath. She didn't hit him. He grabbed the gun and struggled with it for a while. She only hit him in the shoulder. That scared her. The fact that he had defended himself and she was worried if she, in return, was now in danger. Because after the first shot, there were 2 bullets left, because she knew her victim had survived and would now talk. That's what scared her, and she took off running. So what do you think? Do you think she was scared and really didn't recognize him? Before we go any further, I want to mention that Carly cried 3 times during the main trial. First, when the footage of Heath's 911 call was played, and then she cried even more when the footage from the camera worn by the first responding officer to arrive on the scene was played. So this is the footage where Sheriff Lewis enters the house. Heath falls to the ground in front of him and tells him that Ashley is dead. Lewis then goes and finds Ashley. So that was something that seemed to upset Carly. Maybe it was the sight of her mother. Maybe it was how desperate Heath sounded in the 911 call, and the state she saw him in on the footage taken by the sheriff. But maybe her crying was just an effort to manipulate Heath and win his affection. Maybe she was trying to show him she was sorry. Who knows? No one will ever know what drove her to those tears. Also on the stand was Dr. Andrew Clark, a psychiatrist hired by the defense to assess Carly's mental health. He stated that Carly suffered from a type of schizophrenic disorder and that her mental state had deteriorated significantly by the evening of the attack. Dr. Clark told the court, and then her mother finds out she smokes marijuana. This represented a crisis for Carly, who had so longed for her mother's approval. So schizophrenia, inappropriate medication, and the need to get her mother's approval caused Carly to act the way she did and kill her own mother. That was the defense her lawyers presented to the court. The prosecution, however, countered with Carly's diary. In it, she wrote a list of 5 beliefs, including the phrases, "There is no God," and "It's okay to be evil," and "You don't need a family." At the conclusion of the trial in September 2024, prosecutor Michael Smith stated the following: Carly knew the difference between right and wrong. There is no question that Carly Madison Gregg is the one who killed her mother, Ashley Smiley. There is no doubt that she attempted to kill Heath Smiley when she pointed the gun directly at his head and hit him in the shoulder. And there's no mistaking that she was the one who hid the camera and tampered with the evidence. We ask that you find her guilty on all 3 counts because she was not insane at the time it happened. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she knew the difference between right and wrong. The emphasis on the ability to distinguish between right and wrong is crucial, because it is on this principle that the insanity defense rests. When the defense argues that someone is not guilty because of insanity, it is really arguing that the person in question was not mentally capable of understanding that his or her actions were wrong. Similarly, we see this in the defense of temporary insanity, where defendants defend themselves by arguing that although they now know and understand that their actions were wrong, at the time they were influenced by circumstances that prevented them from properly evaluating the situation and acting appropriately. I may be biased against her, but I think Carly knew what she was doing. She was hiding a gun, then the camera. She said she had bullets ready for her stepfather and wanted to lure him home as soon as possible. She refused to help by calling 911, so she didn't want the police to come. And then she attacked her stepfather, and when that didn't work, she ran away. But Carly's defense attorneys argued that she was completely innocent by reason of insanity. They basically said that Carly was insane, had always been insane, and her medication had completely derailed her. This was not a problem child, defense attorney Bridget Todd told the jury in her closing argument. This was not a child who was angry. Just a little note. This statement goes directly against the temporary insanity argument because it says Carly was not so angry that she didn't understand what she was doing. She went on to say, "This is not a child who harbors hatred towards his mother or stepfather. In fact, it was just the opposite. This was a child who was experiencing serious mental health issues, problems that also run in the family history, and which we know can be hereditary." By this, defense counsel is referring to the fact that schizophrenia can be genetically transmitted, even though Carly was not officially diagnosed by an independent psychiatrist, but by a psychiatrist hired directly by the defense to assess her condition. The defense attorney even went so far as to say that Carly loved her mother. Anyway, a lot of psychologists state that because Carly hit her mother several times, in the head, that leads many of them, including myself, to believe that she was very angry and it was very personal. Just deep hatred. Basing your entire defense on a hired expert is a bit risky, but the defense did it anyway and asked the jury to acquit Carly. The jury went into deliberations that lasted approximately 2 hours before returning with a verdict. Carly, who is now only 15 years old, was subsequently informed that she had been found guilty on all 3 counts of the indictment. Carly burst into tears when the verdict was read. It's kind of clear that she was crying for herself at that very moment. She then waited for the jury to come back with a verdict on the sentence. And yes, she waited right there, as the jury took less than an hour to decide on a sentence of life without parole. Carly was then transferred to prison, but her lawyers immediately filed an appeal. In a 9-page motion, the defense presented a detailed argument for why Carly should get a new trial. New evidence and materials have recently been discovered that would likely lead to a different result in a new trial. I don't know. I feel like this is a common argument in every appeal. Well, it's possible that this new evidence that the defense wants to present to the court is actually something that we already know, and that was mentioned during her trial. Defense attorney Bridget Todd announced that this new evidence is based on a statement that Carly's biological father, Kevin Gregg, made in an interview with the media. In it, he mentions that Carly attended hypnotherapy as a child because she suffered from auditory hallucinations. The motion filed states, Kevin Gregg refused to cooperate in Carly's defense, refused to communicate with prosecutors, refused to speak with the mental health professionals who evaluated Carly, and refused to appear at any pre-trial hearing or any other single day of Carly's trial. Therefore, the defense argues that key evidence and information that could have exonerated Carly was not properly presented to the jury. The motion also argues that the witnesses who took the stand had their testimony limited by Judge Dewey K. Arthur's ruling. And if they had been allowed to testify without any restrictions, their words may have persuaded the jury to reach a different verdict. So what they're saying is that if someone repeatedly claims to believe in the innocence of the defendant, that could affect other people's views of that person. But there was no room for that during the trial. Further, the defense attorneys argue in the document that Carly is too young to fully understand the charges against her, or to be able to make an informed decision about what it might mean for her to reject a plea bargain. Much of the public commented on this in the form of various comments under videos about the case. And overwhelmingly, I read opinions that at 14 years old, one is old enough to know not to go around killing people, especially one's own mother. And I guess that's true. At 14, perhaps everyone knows that they shouldn't do such things. But not everyone is the same. If Carly was the kind of 14-year-old who might not have fully realized that killing was wrong, or didn't understand it enough to be deterred by it, we probably can't expect that she was also the kind of 14-year-old who fully understood what it would mean for her to be caught doing it. This is a key point. The defense argues that 14 years is too little to fully understand the consequences of rejecting a plea bargain and to stand trial and fully know what that decision entails. The defense thereby makes a general claim with which I completely disagree, that any 14-year-old is too young to make an informed decision on such a matter. The defense also argues that this is something that the state of Mississippi itself knows and recognizes in its legislation. Under Mississippi law, a person must be 18 years old to vote, but 21 years old to sit on a jury. 18 for voting, 21 for jury service, because the courts want to make sure the juror is old and mature enough to understand the consequences of their decision, such as sending someone to prison for the rest of their life. And yes, there's not much difference between 18 and 21. If we were talking about a 31-year-old versus an 18-year-old, there would be a more pronounced difference. But even that smaller age difference makes clear the state's intent to have people on the jury who are emotionally and intellectually mature enough to make an informed and balanced decision in court. So next, the defense first pointed out that Carly was not convicted by a jury of her peers. And second, that her decision not to accept the plea bargain should not stand. They stated that Carly was 14 years old at the time of the crime and 15 at the time of trial, while everyone on the jury was at least 21 years old. In other words, these were people old enough to understand the implications and consequences of Carly's actions better than she herself could have understood them at the time. Of course, under these circumstances, Carly was judged differently than by someone her age or someone in her situation. So what do these advocates think the courts should do? Should they impanel a jury of 14-year-olds and see if they would still find Carly guilty? Or, I don't know what they're expecting. I see where they're going with this. They just don't have a choice, but they're just boiling water. Well, the defense just filed a motion for a new trial. But one person has come out and said what he thinks about all this, and that he believes Carly is exactly where she's supposed to be. Can you guess who it is? Yes, you're right. Carly's biological father, Kevin Gregg, fully supports the jury's decision to send his own daughter to prison for life. He later told the media this: "That girl knew what was right and wrong. She's not insane. That was a very stupid defense, if you want my opinion." Well, for now, Carly is exactly where Kevin wants her, behind bars. She's now housed in the juvenile offender block at the Mississippi Correctional Facility in Pearl, while her defense tries to push for a new trial. If the motion is denied, or if Carly goes through a new trial and is found guilty again, it is likely that she will remain in the juvenile facility until she reaches the age of majority and then be moved to a real adult prison. It's a very strange case. This is no way to resolve problems with parents. Carly's solution makes sense if she is truly mentally ill and has schizophrenia, which could therefore lead to illogical and irrational behavior. On the other hand, that doesn't mean she was insane in the true sense of the word, and didn't realize the consequences and severity of her actions. Clearly, the jury did not believe that her mental illness was serious enough to justify her actions either, or they would have had to find her not guilty. For my part, it's clear she had mental problems, but she still knew perfectly well what she was doing. Yes, she's a disturbed personality who has no business being around the innocent public. Her icy calm demeanor during the crime is chilling. She doesn't seem to know what empathy is, what guilt and guilty conscience is. So, will you let me know what you think? Do you agree with the verdict? Or do you think she was insane and should have been found not guilty? Let me know in the comments below the video. Thank you all so much for watching the video, for subscribing to my channel, for liking the videos and writing comments. It really helps me a lot and it makes me feel much more eager to work on new videos. So far, have a great time and I'll look forward to seeing you again next time.